decisions of the dead man. They took the diary he had. They took the diary he had it with him when we met, but just now I looked and it wasn't there to tell the diary. Richard said, "You were with him. You could have been killed too." He paused and frowned. "What happened?" he asked. "Did you use who it was?" "No, I was not. No, I was out in the closet. He made me get him this." Matt held up the flower. Now it was Fabian's turn to look puzzled. "What cloister?" he asked. "The church has cloisters," Matt said. "Morton asked me to go there. He said it was some sort of test, but I think he was lying. The church has no cloister," Fabian said. "It's through there." Matt looked in the direction of the door. "Let's go out," Richard said. "You need some air." "There is no cloister," Fabian inserted. Angry, Matt stood up and walked over to the door. It's through here," he said. He opened the door and stopped dead. There was no cloister on the other side. There were no flowers, no fountain, and no monks. Instead, he found himself looking at an alleyway lined with dustbins, and on the other side, a grimly backyard filled with rubble and broken concrete. He looked at the flower in his hand and then threw it down as if it was scolding him. It lay floating in a puddle, the only colours in a world of grey. The danger area. In the end, it all seemed too easy. Matt didn't want any part of it. He would have liked to forget the Nixus. The old ones, William Morton, the diary of the second gate, and all the other weird things that had somehow closed in on him and taken over his life. Certainly he had no great desire to visit Peru, and yet here he was at midday, sitting on a British Airways jumbo jet on the runway at Heathrow Airport on his way to Lima Viva Miami. Once again, he got the feeling that he hadn't chosen to be here. Happened, feeling that he should have been here. It had just happened after the death of the bookseller St. Meredith's church. There had been another meeting of the Nixus, and that was when they had put it to him. "But we want to send you to Peru this time." Miss Ashwood had done most of the talking. Maybe they felt she knew him best. "We've lost the diary. It wasn't your fault, but it's catastrophe. It means that whoever was bidding for it in South America probably has it or will have it soon. The diary will show them how to find the gate. Worse than that, it may show them how to open it." There's nothing Matt can do," Richard said. "You're sending him all the way across the world. What's the point?" I can't really answer that, Mr. Cole. "How can I explain? Imagine this was a game of chess. Losing Morton was like losing a pawn." Now sending you to Peru, it's as if we're advising a knight in the end. It may be too late, it may not help, but at least it shows we're still on the attack. The boy and the gate are linked. Nathan Johnson said Matt could see that the American woman had already made up her mind. He's part of it. Something is going to happen in Peru, and whatever it is, he should be there. Well, Peru's a big country. Where is supposed to begin? In the capital Luma. Why there? We may have one lead. The assistant commissioner explained William Morton had his mobile phone with him when he was killed. Unfortunately for us, his killer left it behind. I've looked at it, and it seems to be made a dozen calls in the week before he died. Some of them to us, of course, but there of them were to a number of in Lima. We've traced the number to Salamander News International. The Frenchman said, "What's that?" Richard asked. "It's one of the biggest businesses on the old that drained content continent." Nathan Johnson explained, and the man who fronts it, Diego Salamander, is one of the richest I've had. Dealing with him in the past, I've never met him. I've had is disabled in some way, and he keeps himself very much to himself. He runs newspapers, TV and satellite stations, publishing houses and hotels, and he does it out of an office in Lima. Was he the one trying to buy the diary? Perhaps, she continued. We can't know for sure, but not much happens within his organisation with him. Knowing it probably comes down to the same thing. If it's Salamander we're up against, that's bad news. Is powerful, but not. But on the other hand, maybe it's good that we know who the enemy is. At least it tells us where to start. Okay, Richard nodded. So you sent back to Lima. What does he do then? He stays with him as a guest. Furman replied, "You will both be welcome in my house. I told you already that I have a house in Baracano. It is quite a part of the city where many artists and writers live. I am not far from the beach. You'll be safe there." William Morton thought he was safe, and look what happened to him. We don't know what went wrong. Miss Ashwood admitted none of us know the meeting place until the day before. And of course we didn't tell anyone. We can only assume he must have been followed or ever. I agree with you. Your safety is of paramount importance, which is why we've decided to take extra protection. Nobody must even know you're left England. What about passport control? Richard asked. Exactly, Miss Ashwood agreed. I'm seeing to to that assistant commissioner and took it over. I'm going to arrange false passports for you. This man Salamander may not have any agents at Heathrow Airport, but he's sure to have people on the lookout when you arrive in Lima. So, so you'll both travel under assumed names. Nobody outside this room will know who you are. It still sounds crazy, Richard said. You plan it. Is that you don't have a plan? Go to Peru. End of it. Story. No, Matt interrupted. It was almost the first time he had spoken, and the 15th adult in the room all turned to look at him. I think Miss Ashwood is right. We can't just walk away, not after all that's happened. The second gate is in Peru. It's going to open. We have to be there. 3 days had passed since then. Now, sitting in the plane, Matt wondered why he had been so disturbed. Maybe the 12 members of the Knicks had been right. His life was completely tangled up with the second gate, and there seemed to be no no escaping it. Or was there a part of him that genuinely wanted help to fight back against that ancient enemy? Matt wasn't sure. All he knew was that he was sweating and felt sick as the engines began to roar in the build-up to take off. He was certain they would fall off the wings, and fall off the wings, and how could this huge machine with its 600 passengers, suitcase, mail trolleys, and all the rest of it? Possible stay up in the air. Matt had only ever flown twice in his life, his entry life, and that had been short ops to mass cells and Malaga with his parents when he was young. This flight was going to last 17 hours. He wasn't afraid of what he might find in Peru, but he was certainly afraid of flying there. 20 minutes later, the 7047 was well above cloud level, already leaving behind the west coast of England. A stewardess come up to them with a menu. Would you like a drink, Mr. Carter actually asked. It took Matt a moment to realise that she was talking to them. Paul and Robert Carter, two brothers travelling together. There were the names on the false passports they had been given. I'll have a beer, thanks, Richard said. Just some water for me, Matt added. They were travelling in business classes, close to the front of the plane. The tickets had cost thousands of pounds, but when the Nixons had been ready to pay millions for the dairy, they obviously wasn't short of cash. Matt settled back in his seat. He had a personal TV with a chance of about 10 films as well, a selection of computer games. Richard had almost brought him a book and some magazines, but he didn't but he didn't feel like doing anything. Sitting there, suspended in the air somehow above the Irish Sea, he felt empty, disconnected. So, do you want to talk about it? Richard asked. What you saw on the other side? Matt shook his head. I don't know, he said. I've been thinking about it. Willie Morton closed the church because of something he'd read in the diary. He used the door as a test to prove I was who he thought I was. Richard nodded. If anyone else went through the door, they'd find themselves standing in a puddle in East London, but I went somewhere else. I'm not even sure I was in England. Matt thought for a moment. Do you remember what it said on that news program? The one we saw on the DVD. See, it said something about an internet within the church. It was one of the things in the diary. Well, maybe that's what it meant. When you sit at a computer, you will click on a mouse and go where you like. You can link up with another computer anywhere in the world. Maybe it's the same sort of thing, only for real. That's great, Richard smiled. So all you have to do is find another church store in Peru, and maybe you can go home without having to pay for the return flight. The stewardess come with the drinks. Sunlight was streaming through the windows, and the smell of lunch was already spreading through the cabin from the gallery just behind them. Only 4 months ago, Matt had been living with his aunt in Ipswich, failing at school, struggling from Monday to Friday, and wasting time at weekends. And now he was here. It was hard to believe Richard seemed to pick up on his thoughts. You didn't have to do that, he said. I think I did, Richard. Matt gazed out of the window. There was nothing to look at, just the clouds in an empty sky. Besides, we knew it, even William Morton. I'm part of this, and I think I always have been trying to pretend otherwise, and I nearly got a whole lot of people killed. He sighed. You don't have to be here, but I think I do. Yeah, well, you're not going anywhere with me. Then we'll stick in it together. The flight seemed endless. Matt watched one film, then another. He read part of his book. He tried to sleep, but without success. The noise of the engine was all around him, and he couldn't forget the fact that he was hanging in space with the ground far too far away. They landed at Miami and spent 2 hours in a characterless transit lounge while the plane refueled. By now, Matt's inner clock was telling him that it was late in the evening, but it was still light outside. The entry day had been stretched out of shape and he felt exhausted. They took off again, and suddenly the weather turned bad. The sky was dark, and a flock of lightning cracked out downwards, flattening against the silver skin of the 747. They hit a patch of turbulence, and Matt felt his stomach heave as the floor momentarily disappeared from beneath his feet inside the business section. The lights had been dimmed. A soft yellow glow illuminated the passengers, sitting in their seats, trying to look relaxed, but at the same time gripping the armrest with all their strength. Nobody was talking, but as every buffet of wind made the plane shudder, and the tone of the engines rose and fell in the swirling air pockets. One or two of them swore softly or even muttered a silent prayer. And somehow, in the middle of all this, Matt finally managed to fall asleep. Not that it felt that way. One moment he was next to Richard, half concentrating on yet another film, and counting the moments until they were back on the ground. The next, he was somehow else. The island he recognized it at once and know it so well that he had to remember himself that he had never actually been there, only ever visited it in his dreams. There was the tower of black broken rock, and there was the sea as ugly as liquid tar spreading out all around it. There was no wind, but the cloud was still racing across a darkening sky. Matt wondered what it all meant. They was here. Why did he so frequently return? He looked down and saw the strange reed boat that had been making its way towards him. The last time he came here, he had reached the edge of the island and sat abandoned on the grey sand. Matt somehow had called his name. He turned around and saw the boy from the boat standing on a rock shelf just below him. The two of them were about the same age, but the boy was smaller and thinner than him, wearing clothes that were little more than rags. Matt opened his mouth to answer. Thank you, subscribe. Thank you for coming. Subscribe, hit the bell, share, like. Thank you. Click on my thumbnail on the main screen. Watch my videos from start to finish. Subscribe, hit the bell, share, like. Thank you.